Hi there, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Frank Tomeno is our guest, and whenever Frank comes in, we talk about local history because Frank knows more about local history than most all of us, and he is the author of a book on local history, History Just for the Fun of It. He's on the board up at the United County History Center, and he continues to write his history column for the Observer-Dispatch.
Yep, every Sunday.
Every Sunday, and it's been going on for how many years, Frank?
Well, I started, frankly speaking, 1968, 51 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And frankly speaking, though, was not always history.
No, I would say 80% was history, but every so often I'd get angry about something and write about it. But I did that for quite a few years. And then when the Utica Daily Press merged with the OD, and we had just the OD, and a new Sunday OD, I stole it from the Binghamton paper, the idea for This Week in History, to go back 100 years. I've changed it a little bit. I usually go back 150 years, because during the Civil War in the 1860s and now in 1869, but reading the 1869 Now papers, it's tough to get really interesting stories. So I thought about, why not go back 242 years, 1777 to the Battle of Oriskany, leading up to the Battle of Saratoga from September to October. So until October anyway, I'll be going back 242 years. But anyway, I started that in 1986 or 7, yep.
And one of the, I think it was the very first project of the, well, then called the United County Historical Society, was building that monument in Oriskany, yes?
Yeah, people forget that before the 100th anniversary, 1877, and the Oneida Historical Society was founded a year before, 1876. The battle site had been forgotten. The Battle of Oriskany, it was farmland. Farmers would be digging, planting their crops, and they'd come up with a bone or something. It was, there wasn't even a marker. The state ignored it. It really was, on the 50th anniversary, there was a little ceremony there, but it was forgotten until 1876, the Oneida Historical Society came into being. And the following year, actually it was John Seymour, Horatio Seymour's brother, who was secretary of the Oneida, Oneida Historical, not Oneida County, the Oneida Historical Society, got the idea, why don't we buy some of the land where the battle was fought, and they bought 5 acres, and let's build a monument there. So they began a drive to raise money. I think they needed $12,000 to $13,000. And it was John Seymour who, reading some old documents, came across a document that right after the Battle of Oriskany, just a couple of weeks afterwards, the Continental Congress, they were meeting in York, Pennsylvania, suggested that $500 be spent to build a monument in honor of General Herkimer, who had died by that time. So, you know, the Congress in Washington realized the importance of the Battle of Oriskany. And, but the country had no money then. This is 1777. And so it was just forgotten. Seymour in 1877 found that document, and he got the area congressman in Congress to say, we want that $500 you promised us, you know, so many years ago. And after a debate, we got the $500 plus interest. So it was $4,100. And then the state chipped in $3,000, and then, make a long story short, the money was raised. And it was through the Oneida Historical Society that that beautiful monument that we have there now was built. You know?
You mentioned General Herkimer. Of course, he was wounded at the Battle of Oriskany.
Oh yeah, he was wounded at the Battle of Oriskany. He died 11 days later. He really, it was an inexperienced doctor. After the battle, the British still surrounded Fort Stanwix, and the Americans sent General Benedict Arnold and 800 men from Albany west along the Mohawk to lift the siege. Arnold had a doctor with him. When they reached Herkimer's home, Herkimer was still wounded, but he was, I guess he was going to survive.
Yeah.
But this inexperienced doctor decided to amputate his leg. He had been wounded in the leg. And something, the arteries weren't, whatever he did, Herkimer bled to death, and 11 days after the battle.
Yeah. And
So-
General Arnold, Benedict Arnold, he got to the Oriskany battlefield.
Oh yeah, and well, and then he reached Fort Stanwix. He lived well, the British had surrounded the fort. The British plans were to capture the fort and then proceed along the Mohawk Valley to Albany. When the Battle of Oriskany, really, Herkimer failed to, his goal was to lift the siege. He didn't lift the siege, but he really not only stopped the British had expected an easy time. You had a bunch of farmers in the Mohawk Valley. How were they going to fight this British army? And the Native Americans who were allies with the British also were promised, you're going to have an easy time of this. Well, their first battle, the Senecas lost 5 chiefs. So the Indians decided to retreat. And then when St. Ledger heard that Arnold was on his way, then he decided to retreat and gave up the plan to enter the Mohawk Valley from the west.
Turning point of the Revolution.
In my opinion, yes.
And when Benedict Arnold got to Oriskany, you got my mind thinking about this, Frank. When you mentioned farmers in later years digging up bones, you weren't being facetious, because there was General Herkimer wasn't even able to bury the American dead.
Well, no, they just left everything. There were, in that battle, Herkimer had about 800 men, 750 to 800 men. Probably the Battle of Oriskany was the bloodiest battle in American history. 59% of the Americans casualties, many of them dead. And when Herkimer returned to Fort Dayton, now Herkimer, the bodies were just left there. And from what I've read, years later, farmers would be digging, and all of a sudden they come across a skull or a bone or something. It's too,
I recall reading, Frank, that somebody asked somebody with General Arnold's command about finding it. He said there was no trouble. You could smell it miles away.
yeah, well, it was
battlefield.
don't forget, it was hand-to-hand combat,
Yeah.
most of it. Hatchets and so,
Yeah.
terrible.
When we
terrible.
come back, let's talk about your mayoral series. Frank has been writing a mayoral series for the Utica Observer Dispatch. We'll talk to him about that right after this short break. Right back.